See, when you learned that you weren't going to be able to walk, like what was your mindset like? It must have been like at 18 years old. That must have been a really hard pill to swallow.
You have to try and keep a brave face, because it's one thing to go through the experience yourself, but then it's another thing to sort of see the impact it has on your friends, your family, your parents. It's a really emotional thing, right? So we're going through an emotional experience, and because we're going through an emotional experience, you need to really get the emotion out and look at it from an intellectual perspective. If we respond to it in a way that brings us closer to our creator, well, then that is actually a form of worship. Yeah, that's actually, we're passing that test. Yeah, where if we respond in a way that pushes us away, yeah, we're failing that test. Yeah. So for example, and we don't have to look at it from,
that's a really good linear kind of like binary way of looking at it. If just asking that question, am I, whatever hardship is going through, am I getting closer to God or am I not? I think that's a really kind of easy way of just giving you a feeling of, is this right or not?
It's like a litmus test. Yeah.
Sure.
So for example, and I think sometimes we don't even have to look at it from from a sort of a struggle point of view. Look at it from a blessings. Yeah, like, hey, I've been blessed with a new job or this extra wealth.
Sure.
Has this brought me closer or has this pushed me away? Yeah. Or have I responded in a way that I've come closer, or have I responded in a way that I've drawn away? Yeah.
So we're recording. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah for joining me.
Alhamdulillah, welcome, bro. Really great for you to get in touch, and came as a bit of a surprise, to be honest, but a pleasant one nonetheless. So really good to, when you said that you were from Scotland, I was just like, wow. I know there's Muslims there, but it's fantastic to actually speak to one.
So, yeah, mashallah, and I'm happy to speak to you as well.
Alhamdulillah.
What really drew me to your story is that a lot of people, we see them go through kind of hard times, and then they start questioning, is there a God, or why is there a God, why does he allow suffering and stuff. But what kind of drew me about your story is you've went through a really tough experience in your life, and it seems that you've come out of that more spiritual, and now you're working in the field of dawah and you're doing voluntary work. And even because obviously before we started recording, I was just talking to you for the last 10 minutes, and you have such a kind of nice demeanor. You just seem like a really nice guy. So I'd love to hear a bit about what happened to you and how did that kind of go side by side with your spiritual growth?
Right, alhamdulillah. Well, I'd like to think I'm a nice guy. Maybe I am. But so what happened was, I was raised in a relatively conservative family here in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne, close to my parents. Actually, pretty sheltered upbringing, to be honest. But nevertheless, I only had my mum's side of the family, but our family was pretty tight knit. And my parents worked really, really hard as migrants, and tried to give us the most comfortable upbringing as possible. And so we focused a lot on study and the normal migrant upbringing where you're just studying all day and trying to get the best marks and do that nerd experience for your childhood. But hey, that worked out for us. Worked out really well. And then anyway, fast forward. My father went through a particular series of he was a medical doctor, and he had to get his whole registration, and the whole thing was a lot of our life was centered around that, because at that time I probably didn't realize, but looking back at it in retrospect, it was definitely our big break. Yeah. At least economically. Yeah. So anyway, I finished school, I went to university, and he just opened up this his first medical practice, and so it was a big opportunity, and I had never worked a day in my life, right? My parents took care of me all the time and never had to take a part-time job. They never really put me out in that. Anyway, I'm shoved into this managerial role of this pretty decent size business. I have no work experience. I'm there with my elder sister, who was just studying pharmacy at the time there. And so we're just figuring things out. And I don't know, I mean, we're pretty resourceful kind of people. So we learned a lot along the way, but it was incredibly busy and incredibly For me, it's quite tiresome, right? We're working, I think, from many days, 7 to 7, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Wow.
consecutive days, and it's crazy, like 60-hour weeks.
Wow.
And
you're pretty young at this point.
Yeah, I'm only 18
Wow.
at the time, right? So, but again, I was really close with my parents, and so it was like I'd go to work with my dad, I'd come back home, and it taught me a lot. It really grew me professionally. I got to speak to all these stakeholders, and I'm just a kid, and people taking me seriously. Yeah. So anyway, I'm driving back, I drive back to and from work, throughout the day. And one day, just so be it, coming from work to home, and have a car accident. Right, I'm there with my little brother is in the car with me, and I was driving. I'm not sure what actually the car's probably still this. It was called a Toyota Yaris. It's a little two-door hatchback. In 2008, I think it was. And for whatever reason, I actually just picked it up from. It came out of repairs. I picked it up from the dealership, and so I drove it home, and near my neighborhood, there's sort of this sharp turn. And anyway, whatever happened, I apparently hit a tree with my little brother in this car, and this car is literally a plastic car, right? And my life changed from that moment onwards. I woke up. My little brother was in the car, although alhamdulillah he wasn't hurt. Although he doesn't remember any of it. He just he said he just said he just hurt. He just tapped his head somewhere. Anyway, he must have sort of knocked out for a little bit. But anyway, we were good. He was good, alhamdulillah. But I was hurt quite badly. I woke up 2 weeks later in a coma, and what was told to me is what they found out. And what they found was that, hey, I had some pretty bad injuries. I had a head injury. I had a bleed in my brain. I had a really bad spinal injury, and I also had punctured lungs on both sides. So it was, and I didn't, I went through this experience. I had emergency surgery, and I woke up 2 weeks later, and all this, my body had gone through this entire experience, and of course my family and parents in the back,
it must have been so stressful for them. Must have been
yeah,
really
it would have been. I can't imagine it really. And sure. I came out of it, and I came out of it not really knowing what it, the impact that it was going to have on me. And I had I'm 18 years old at the time. I remember I had my 19th birthday. They took out because I had punctured lungs on both sides, so my ribs went into my lungs, and so I couldn't breathe for myself, and I had a breathing tube that was coming out of my throat. And on my 19th birthday, they took my breathing tube out. And I remember my mum gave me, there was this particular type of cake that I liked, and I got to have a little bit of cake that day. But you went from I was pretty really functional, really energetic, sort of active person, to suddenly bedbound for months on end. And so I was in hospital, and in July, and I got out in December.
That's a long time.
I spent 6 months from acute hospital to then of rehab. And so basically they gave me about 6 months to figure out how I'm going to live my life given my circumstances. So fast forward, many things repaired itself, but one thing that doesn't repair itself is sort of the neurological damage in the spine. So my spinal cord injury is what's considered as a permanent disability, which basically just means that my lower limbs are paralyzed. And so I use a wheelchair to get around. And I had a few other chronic issues that come along, but that's probably the one that you can sort of see visually. And something like that reorientates your life in so many ways. You're 18 years old, you're thinking about getting married, having kids, building a career, all these other, traveling, having all these experiences, and suddenly it's like bang, a real reality check. And that real reality check, you sort of, people are consoling you around the side, and you're trying to stay strong. But within you, there's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of questions, and you have to try and keep a brave face, because it's one thing to go through the experience yourself, but then it's another thing to sort of see the impact it has on your friends, your family, your parents. And so you're trying to stay strong, mainly for them, really.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so see, like at 18 years old, see when, you learned that you weren't going to be able to walk, like what was your mindset like? It must have been like at 18 years old, that must have been a really hard pill to swallow.
To be honest, I noticed one thing that was prevalent in this space, because so I went to this ward, the spinal injury ward, and of course, people had injuries of all types. My injury in my spine, although it was pretty bad, there was worse. There was really, really bad ones out there, yeah. And there was this obsession with getting back to walking, right? Because I guess that's the function that you lost. And there's sort of physiological issues why that's really difficult to achieve. But it never really I never really saw that loss in walking as something that was entirely detrimental, to be honest. And I think that helped me. And I had my psyche or my mentality was not about, I want to walk again. It was just, I want to get back into my life again. Yeah. And I eventually found that, it's actually, a lot of it's actually quite possible. I remember there was a guy in rehab, and he was an Olympian. He did the Paralympics for, I think, wheelchair rugby as well as basketball, and he won a gold and a silver medal. And this guy all those injuries are a little bit different to mine. I remember him telling me about, he was having a kid, he just got married, and he was just telling me all this stuff. And at that time, I was like, wow, right? Is this even possible? And things like, although I didn't spend too much time with him, but it just that person's presence, that he'd come out of this system, yeah, he's sort of come out of this experience, and it sort of showed that there was a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel. I didn't have that obsession. I noticed that there was people in there and I still know, I have friends who are still sort of trying to, 10, 12, 15 years, they're working hard, and may Allah bless them and give them strength to achieve their goals. But looking back, I think it's a bit of an impediment in terms of functionally moving forward into your life. Like if I put it bluntly, I didn't really care that I wasn't going to walk again, to be honest. I was more interested in being able to get back into those areas of my life. And I found that I could still do that in different ways. So even now, it's like, yeah, cool. I mean, I can say this from a huge point of privilege in Melbourne, Australia, with the certain, socio-economic circumstances that the cards that I have. And there's certain things that would make things much more difficult. So if I was in a different part of the world, if I didn't have access to medical care, I didn't have a supportive network, I didn't have, the financial capacity, I didn't have this and that, like, it would be totally different. So I when I mention this, it's obviously very specific to my situation. And that's sort of the advice I probably give people in this. I had someone reach out to me recently, and he was actually from the US. I forget which part of the US, and he texted me and he said, hey, listen to this, and I'm interested in doing Hajj. Give me some advice and blah, blah, blah. And so he was just going through this process, and I was like, and I spoke to him, and it felt really empowering being able to pass on this experience with other people, and they could really relate to it.
Amazing. Well, obviously, it looks like you have gotten married, right? And you have kids, because I see all the play apparatus behind you.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a bag of Pampers over there, right?
Yeah, that's actually behind me is my son's play area. So I think he wants to. You might actually see him in the background. he's doing a good jump. So there he is.
Oh yeah, subhanallah. So you had a kid. That's amazing, mashallah.
So my son's almost 2. So I've been married for a few years now, alhamdulillah. Good. So that was a big goal and a big milestone. And so he's a incredibly cute little kid, man. So
that's amazing, mashallah. That's amazing. So wow, that's really an incredible story. I really like how you set your goals, and you wanted to have that independence, you wanted to get your life back, and that I'm really surprised that it didn't hit you so hard that you weren't going to be able to walk again. It's really impressive that you had such a kind of mature attitude about that, which actually allows you to go forward and progress through what would really must have been a hard time.
Oh, if I could add to that, if I could just make a comment on that. When I say I don't say, then like it wasn't something. Part of it was conscious, but part of it was also innate. So for me, it wasn't like every single day I had to sort of redefine my purpose and orient myself. It was just within me that there could have been a lot of things there, but I just didn't see it as incredibly important. Not to say that I didn't try and I didn't put the best in my rehab and that sort of stuff. I absolutely did. Yeah. And I still, of course, still take care of myself on that. And I hope, one day, some sort of medical breakthrough will come. But my point is, I didn't want to sit there and wait for it.
Sure, I get
it. Like I'm 18, man. I'm 8. I've got so much of my life to live. And, I lost, that whole experience between 18 and 21. I was in and out of hospital. I actually had my surgery done the second time. I was figuring out a lot of things. I socially, I missed out on a lot, I think, still.
Of course, yeah.
But at the same time, I think it did mature me mentally.
Oh, well, it must have massively. But what I'm really interested to know about is, like, so it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but your spirituality was stronger after this. It probably, maybe not immediately, but eventually. Because when you did your TEDx talk, and I've seen you in other podcasts, talk about your spirituality. Did that come after the accident, or was that there before as well?
So I was, alhamdulillah, my parents always, my mom and my dad, we went through the whole system of, the madrasa, the Sunday schools, the, staying close to the masjid and parents practicing and home and whatnot. And so I was sort of always in that space, but there was a moment where I sort of, when I re-entered university, that was when probably the intellectual conviction that journey started. Where,
what were you studying?
I was originally studying physiotherapy when I had my accident. I went back and finished off the second year and I left that. I took some time off and I came back and I ended up in studying, dabbling in philosophy and politics. And when it was there, I really encountered certain things, questions, and it sort of really sparked my thirst or interest in these areas. And in doing that, I took this, I decided to change my major and I went into philosophy of religion. And Monash Uni, where they've got a pretty good course there for that. And I found it really empowering as my interest in that area, started reading, started learning, started studying, doing courses here and there, and then doing that at university as well. And I really built, I think, hopefully a strong intellectual conviction in many spaces. And that was when I think that really helped my spirituality the most. Prior to that, I was a Muslim who was curious, who was born Muslim, was nurtured in a good environment, but I wasn't challenged intellectually. There were certain things that I had, but I sort of just kept it in the, parked it in a part of my mind. And I was able to sort of unpack that at a particular moment. And that was really empowering. Those years of uni, and I got in touch with so many different people. and I got involved in the Dawa space, and
Mashallah.
yeah,
Amazing.
things move on from there. So
Yeah, man.
alhamdulillah.
So, see, what I find really amazing about this is, I've known people to go through hard times, and then they kind of have this, God, why me? And then, that's when the disbelief starts to crawl in. So I think it's really incredible that, uh, you know, alhamdulillah, through university and through education, through the will of Allah, it allowed you to actually grow a stronger faith to the point where you're doing dawah now and you're spreading the faith with others. In fact, I saw on your Instagram today, you're actually doing a speech in front of a classroon, telling them about
Yeah, I was
Islam.
at it. There was a bunch of school kids that we actually did it last week as well, and then because there were certain restrictions happening in Melbourne, we couldn't do it in person, so we ended up doing it on Zoom. And so, but I'd like to just quickly comment on, just to rewind a little bit. I had a lot of lows. So I know in retrospect it's sort of easier to sort of shun that, but there was I do remember many times where I didn't have that. I did feel a lot of self-pity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I saw people around me, and things are moving around, and here I am, in this situation, and I'm sure, do I blame myself? Do I blame somebody else? Do I blame the creator?
Mm-hmm.
These are thoughts that did enter my mind. And there was a sense of hopelessness many times, and mentally it was challenging, but there was I went through that. I think I went through that phase, and alhamdulillah, I wouldn't credit it to myself. I think it's one of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he holds you close to him, and he allows you to go through that process to realize certain things, and I feel like I was able to realize those things, and then I was also able to articulate that intellectually, so it wasn't just an experiential sort of thing. There was actually a theoretical, intellectual sort of background to it too, and put those two things together, and it made for a happy person.
Subhanallah, that's amazing. So, well, see, now I've noticed that obviously you read your background in your university, you're studying politics and philosophy and such, but you actually have been in the debating field, and I saw you have a debate against, what was his name again?
I've had a few.
I think this was one against a Christian that I watched.
Yeah, so do I name these people? I don't want to make them famous.
All right, okay.
Samuel, I think the most recent one I had a couple with Samuel Green. I had one with James White. I had a few others with just that, it started at uni,
Sure.
and it took us, I remember I used to drive past this sort of like this cathedral church in the CBD here in Melbourne, and I always used to wonder what these things look like inside. And I remember I got a phone call. It was like, hey, James White's coming to Melbourne on this particular day. Would you like to have a conversation with him? And I'm like, yeah, cool. And anyway, lo and behold, it happens to be inside this church. That was and this church, literally the whole, it's like, really medieval, like gargoyles and that sort of stuff. And I'm sitting here inside this place, and there's not one. I couldn't identify one. I could only identify one Muslim in a crowd of maybe 200 people, and it was like she was sitting right at the back.
Oh my gosh, is that not really difficult and really kind of daunting, being like the only Muslim there and needing to defend Islam against a crowd which is un-Islamic?
I actually prefer it, because debates, I wouldn't look at debates as dawah per se. They function, they have a particular function, a particular purpose, but they're generally not dawah platforms. So when you see a crowd of only Christians, it makes it a little bit more dawah-ish, as opposed to you don't have anyone cheering you on, so you really want to articulate yourself in a meaningful way. So I always enjoy that, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. What I wanted to talk to you about as well is you have a kind of response, and this is how I found you, and you were responding to, I think it was Richard Dawkins, who says, how can there be a God if there's so much evil in the world and there's so many problems in the world? And I think you gave a really beautiful response to that. So what was that?
Oh well, I'm gonna check out my notes now. So essentially, it's to reorientate, look at the Islamic conception of God as opposed to the Judeo-Christian version.
Yeah.
So what I spoke about, and this is what I came to understand, is often this idea of the problem of evil and suffering in the world. It's a problem. It's essentially actually a problem for the Christian conception of God, not for the Islamic conception. And if we muddle it, it can be an issue for Muslims. But intellectually, historically, this has never been an issue in Islamic scholarship for a very, very good reason, right? And the reason for it is that that there's a few assumptions to this particular problem of evil and suffering. One of the assumptions is that God is only good and all powerful, right? And we know that in the Islamic perspective, God is. We have these 99 names and attributes of our Creator, right? And we have a sort of a more, I believe, a more in-depth, detailed understanding of the Creator. Yeah, and so God is obviously, He's all good. Yeah, He's all powerful, but He's also all wise. Yeah. In the Christian understanding, they don't have this. So this is probably a really important component, because it gives context to power. It gives context to being all knowing, and so being all wise. If there's wisdom, there must be a reason, and if there's a reason, we just simply have to understand that reason. Yeah. But here's the challenge. The challenge is that we're not all knowing, and God is all knowing. Yeah. We have just the pixel. You have this picture of a 4K picture. Imagine trying to describe the entire 4K picture by just grabbing one pixel. Yeah, you see a tiny amount of the wider picture, and because we can only see a little bit of it, we understand things from our perspective. And so, if our perspective is limited, our understanding is also limited.
Sure.
Yeah, but imagine if we could zoom out and we could look at it from all perspectives. And if we looked at it from all perspectives, we'll be able to understand so many things.
And the truth in it, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of, we can
why did I go through this hardship?
We can look at how it impacts this, the future, what this holds, and because God can see that, yeah, through His ultimate wisdom, He puts us through what is best for us, even if we don't realize it in the beginning. And because our understanding is so limited, often we can only appreciate the wisdom in retrospect. Yeah. So I can have a chat with you 13 years after the fact and say, you know what? Wow, I realized all this stuff. And if I didn't go through A, B, C, and D that led to X, Y, and Z, where would I have been? Yeah. And I can understand why things happened and why they happened then and there. And this is through our own limited understanding. Yeah. So that's probably the most important component, that just because we see something in a particular moment, we also have to appreciate that there's other ways of understanding this particular instance. Yeah. So if we see and the thing is, it's a really emotional thing, right? So we're going through an emotional experience, and because we're going through an emotional experience, it's hard you need to really get the emotion out and look at it from an intellectual perspective. Because when you look at it emotionally,
difficult
it clouds our understanding.
Yep.
Yeah. We're going through difficulty, we're going through hardship. And so it's hard to think straight, right? And I empathize with everyone on this, because it's like, or you almost don't blame you for that, right? You're going through that particular experience. It's really hard it takes a very strong, it takes a really measured person to just be able to chill in the moment. Yeah.
Sure.
And so that's really important. Yeah. That there's different perspectives for the one experience. And so if we feel a particular way, we just try and look at it from a different perspective. And this we can understand through even cognitive psychology. Yeah. By attributing different meanings to different things, we can experience them in different ways. Yeah. So we can attach different meanings and understand it from a different perspective because of that. Right. And there's so much work written on this. I think one of the famous works it's not from psychology, but it has a good grounding. From the, I think it's one of the Holocaust survivors, Viktor Frankl, Man Searches for Meaning.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Yeah, so he
Man
goes
Searches
through
for
a part.
Meaning.
Yeah, so there's a really, really good lesson to be learned from there as well. But that's one perspective, that our Islamic understanding of God is quite different, and because it's different, it gives us more depth and ability to understand. Then we can look at it from a cognitive psychology point of view, and then we can also look at it from the different perspectives. And then the other there was another assumption there that sort of just skipped my mind at the moment. But if it comes up, I'll bring it up. But
Okay.
putting all those things together, there was the intellectual framework for this question is actually not too difficult, to be honest. And I was really surprised, because there's this question of evil and suffering. It's one of, at least in the Christian tradition, it's one that there's books written about this. There's so much written about this, yeah. And it's one of the, in fact, for modern day, actually for atheists in general, I think this seems to be one of the silver bullet arguments, where you don't have an answer for this, right? But when I try and engage with this question, I'm not saying that this happened because this bad thing happened because of this. I'm not trying to give you an answer. All I'm trying to say to you is to say that there's a different way of looking at this, and if you have faith that God is all loving, He has your best interests at heart, perhaps there's a different perspective that you can look at it from. And so just consider that, yeah. Because sometimes I think one of the most unempathetic things you could do to someone is, somebody's going through a difficulty and you tell them, this is happening because of this. Yeah. Like, one, you're not engaging with the person or their feeling or their experience, but two, you're looking at it from a restricted point of view as well. Yeah. So, sometimes some people tell you that, okay, this happened because you did this, or, I don't know, in some cultures, they can be quite superstitious.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So I don't think that's very helpful.
So see, when someone's in the midst of that, like, hardship, with that kind of trial, where as you said, it's very hard to see forward or to understand the reason for that, what advice could you offer for someone like that? And had a part two of that question, but slipped my mind.
Yeah, so I think the big take home, and I think it's a really general approach you could give to anyone, is try and get them to understand it from another point of view. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What other points of view can you see this from? Yeah, because Islamic, and this is the point I wanted to bring it. Yeah, in the Islamic point, from the Islamic point of view, it's that if we go through a particular experience, whether it's good or bad, it's a test. Yeah, our life is a test, whether it's good or bad, whether it's pleasurable or we feel pain from it. Yeah, every single instance in our life is a test. But the test is how do we respond to it? If we respond to it in a way that brings us closer to our Creator, well, then that is actually a form of worship. Yeah, that's actually we're passing that test. Yeah, where if we respond in a way that pushes us away, yeah, we're failing that test. Yeah. So, for example, and we don't have to look at it from.
That's a really good kind of like binary way of looking at it. If just asking that question, am I, whatever hardship is going through, am I getting closer to God or am I not? I think that's a really kind of easy way of just giving you a feeling of, is this right or not?
It's like a litmus test. Yeah.
Sure.
So, for example, and I think sometimes we don't even have to look at it from, from a sort of a struggle point of view. Look at it from a blessings. Yeah. Like, hey, I've been blessed with a new job or this extra wealth.
Sure.
Has this brought me closer or has this pushed me away? Yeah. Or have I responded in a way that I've come closer, or have I responded in a way that I've drawn away? Yeah. So, we can look at it from both sides. It is a binary, but I think it's an easy way to sort of appreciate which direction we're moving in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So see with like when your head gets clouded with the emotions, I mean, one, you've been through what most people would consider a really big hardship. Would you say that's made it easier in a sense, or when you deal with, you know, smaller stressful situations, that you can see kind of through the mist of a stressful situation? Or do you have any particular practices which you exercise when you find yourself getting into such predicaments?
Um, I'd like to think it has, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'll explain. I'll explain it in this way: is that I still have my, you know, I still get anxious at certain things. I still get, you know, a little bit flustered here and there. But there was this one moment where I was. This is sort of a little bit disconnected, but it hit me, and it was so simple, but was really profound. I remember I was setting up for a workshop for this part. I was doing this workshop, a professional development session for madrasa teachers, and I was setting up, and the principal of the school, and I'm really close to this particular sheikh, and you know, he said something to me, and I said to him, oh, you know, he said something to me. I said to him, oh, you know, it's okay. It all worked out because this happened and this happened, and it was okay. And then he said this thing to me, and it was really simple. He said to me, it always works out. It always does. And this sounds like so basic, yeah. But at that moment, it really hit my heart. I thought to myself, yeah, you're right. You're right. It does always work out. Yeah, it always does. Whether you know it or not, it ends looking, when you look back, it's like, hey, it did work out in the end, didn't it? You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is truly a test. He'll only, when he tells you, he will only give you enough hardship that you can bear. That's true. That is so true. Yeah, you come out of every hardship. You haven't been wiped off the face of this earth. Yeah, a difficulty comes, and for whatever reason, something happens, and it works out. Yeah, it works out for the good or works out for the bad, but the point here is it works out. Yeah, so things come into place whether you can appreciate it in the moment or you appreciate it later. And I think looking at it from that perspective is that it will work out. Things will work out, right? You might not be able to realize it now, but when you look at it from that lens, I think it's really empowering. It's easier said than done. You know, I'll definitely put a caveat on that. It's easier said than done, but if you're able to exercise that way of thinking, I think that would help you a lot. You know, yeah, you know, we'll just those few words. It always does, and it's true. It always does. You know, when I look back at my life, yeah, things were pretty bad many times, but hey, it did work out.
Yeah.
And people go through different, like, I think sometimes, you know, you can pull out my story and say, okay, you know, this guy had this, you know, life-changing you know, experience with a disability, but at the same time, that's not like to belittle other people's challenges that they go through. Yeah, I don't think you need to go through a traumatic medical experience, I think, to appreciate those sort of things.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. I see it from like perspective. You know, we go through this hardship and you think, you know, you might have a plan of how you think your future is going to look, and then, you know, you're hit with a situation from one day to the next. It doesn't look like that anymore, and we might feel kind of disappointment and loss. But then it's really, you know, and I see this in people who, you know, they come out of a relationship, or maybe they lose a job, or they didn't get into university. In my case, it was like I didn't get into university, but alhamdulillah, what comes next is, you know, it can be better. And I think a big part of kind of maturity is sometimes just saying, you know, God, thank you for closing that door on me. You know, we thought that was where we were supposed to go, but it wasn't. And, you know, I do think it takes a great deal of resilience and patience and maturity to really be able to see that.
There's also, I think, you touched on this, and I want to comment on it as well. Mm-hmm. It's that sort of you know, you set our goals, you set our plan, and I know in you know, we need to plan and prepare, and of course, otherwise, you know, as the saying goes, if you don't prepare, you prepare, or you plan to fail, or something like that, whichever way it goes. But at the same time, you know, yeah, set your goals, set your plans, but know that a lot of that is not even in your hands, man. Seriously, like I think a good friend of mine, a brother who I really respect in terms of a lot of the contribution he's made in my life at least, and he always tells me, you know, I only really plan about 6 months ahead. Yeah. Anyway, the guy's, you know, doing his PhD and doing all that sort of stuff. So he's got a lot of things going well for him anyway. But practically, you know, he tells me practically, you know, things curveballs, come along so often. And you know, if I look back at myself 13 years ago and I said, okay, even if I had a plan, okay, I want to be here, man. You know, I'm nowhere near there. I'm somewhere else. But I didn't foresee myself being here in this particular space. But you know what? I probably wouldn't give back anything to be here. You know, I'm really happy with it, and you know, you might not be able to appreciate that in the beginning, but again, you know, you got the benefit of hindsight.
Sure, man. I mean, now you know, you got married, you know, you've had a son, mashallah, and you know, you're now being like a representative of Islam when you perform these debates or when you're doing dawah. So, you know, there's a hard time you had to go through, but inshallah, that's going to work as a source of inspiration and motivation to other people who are in a hard situation. And I hope people who, you know, God forbid, do need to face such an ordeal, such a hardship, you know, they can listen to someone like yourself who approaches with patience and with kind of that resilience, and you came out of it for the better. And, you know, I hope a lot more people can hear your story and benefit from it, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. I hope so. You know, I wouldn't want an experience like this to go to waste. If I can pass on, transmit some old man wisdom, I'm really happy to do that. And I think it does. You know, people see, you know, and with disability in general, right? So obviously you can't see me from here, but I use a wheelchair, right? So but with disability in general, it's sort of it does help break down some barriers and some misconceptions, right? And the network of people in the community that I've been here. I mean, I'm here in the first world here in Melbourne, right? Melbourne's built up; it's really accessible. People are pretty diverse and accepting of a lot of things, and so you know, I haven't felt that stigma. And I can appreciate. And I've been to a couple of parts of the world, and it's been a little bit different. So you know, people experience disability in different ways, and you know, opening up people's eyes to the experiences other people, you know, encounter is really important. And you know, mine's different. I think. I mean, different in the sense that. Hey, I can't walk, like really big deal, man. Like I drive, I go to the gym, I go to uni, I can work, I can talk, I can debate, I can do all the intellectual stuff. I still have a lot of fun. You know, and there's other disabilities where, you know, people are deprived of much more. So, you know, in some ways, I probably don't think I'm affected that much. Maybe that's why I've got it easy. But alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Before we finish off, where can people find you?
Instagram at Mr.Hamimi, or Facebook. Just Facebook my name, Abdulah Hamimi, and you'll find me. So Instagram and Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I probably won't. Not yet. Anyway. No, I don't think my wife will let me go on that.
You'd be surprised. There's probably videos of you already on it.
Okay, someone's cut a snippet out or something like that.
Okay, I'll put all of your links in the bio, but Jazakallah khair for coming and telling me your story today.
Oh, welcome, bro. Appreciate the opportunity, and Mala bless you. And I hope to one day we cross paths in person.
I hope so, inshallah.
Either you come to Australia or I come to Scotland. You know, I think there's a lot to be done there, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, bro.
Yeah, cool.